Oh, they were very happy. The atmosphere here at DUP headquarters has been quite jolly because the voter turnout was higher at every hour recorded than the ones recorded back in 2007 and 2002. Traditionally, a higher voter turnout gave the Democratic United Party victory, so they were very happy. Meanwhile, the Century Party and the Democratic United Party are still attacking each other for engaging in illegal campaign activities on this day. In a briefing, DUP officials accused the Century Party for sending text messages to supporters, urging them to encourage their family and friends to go vote for Park Geun-hye. In addition, the opposition party said the Bok camp in other regions illegally used vehicles they had prepared to transport their supporters to polls. While condemning the Century Party for its alleged illegal campaigning activities, the DUP held a briefing after briefing encouraging voters, especially those in Seoul, to take part in voting. The opposition party is welcoming the higher voter turnout, but it is also wary of the fact that only a few people in the Seoul metropolitan area actually took part in voting. Back to you guys in the studio.
Well, thank you for that, Yeonji. That was our Kim Yeonji, who will be at the DUP headquarters all throughout the night until the final call is made. Keep up the good work, Yeonji.
All right, so we've seen how each camp is reacting to the exit poll results. And Carl, you were just telling us that a JTBC poll is showing Park's lead of 49.6%, and Moon Jae-in at 49.4%. That's 0.2 percentage points difference. Now, JTBC, of course, is the broadcaster arm of the Chungang Daily here in Korea. All right, what are your thoughts on these numbers?
Again, too early to tell. I mean, there's going to be a lot of confusion, I think, for the next several hours. So all of the exit polls are indicating different things. We have one that swings it with a fairly, well, comparatively wide margin to Moon Jae-in, and the rest of them that show Park Geun-hye in the lead are fairly close. So again, that's probably fairly encouraging for Moon Jae-in, the fact that at least in one, he has a much wider margin than Park Geun-hye has in any of the others. But until we actually start to see some real results about regional breakdowns, about gender breakdowns, age breakdowns, it's kind of, shooting in the dark at this point.
Right, the extra factor here added to the comparison is gender background at the moment, because we did not have to really probe into this factor in the previous elections. This is the first female presidential candidate. So in your opinion, how did that change the whole landscape in terms of course, voter turnout and whatnot?
Well, as far as its effect on voter turnout, it's not clear to me that it had any extra effect. It seems that there was plenty of other motivation, whether it was actual liking of a candidate or perhaps just disliking one less, as I know you have mentioned before. But what we've seen through the polling that we've done is that Park Geun-hye has consistently held a 6 to 10 point lead among women. And women make up about 51% of the entire population. So, but again, whether they turned out in enough numbers to take advantage of that lead will remain to be seen.
Right, but she does have that campaign slogan for Park Geun-hye. It's, of course, a female president who is prepared and ready to take on the job.
Right. But it wasn't she didn't really hammer that issue home. And partly because the older voters who are her major base, they are thinking of her not really as a woman, but as the daughter of Park Chung-hee. So she's not a very feminist candidate. Her positions are very similar to Moon Jae-in on gender issues. And so there hasn't really been any kind of sway back and forth. She's just enjoyed this advantage, and maybe she hasn't played upon it enough. But I think the fear was that if she did try to play on the gender card, it would end up backfiring on her.
Right, and as we speak, we were actually just seeing live footage from each of the camps, and we saw, quite contrary to when the initial exit polls were released, we're seeing both camps very calm and staying prudent to see how the vote camp counting goes. Han. Now we have another rush coming in that as for the Seoul Education Superintendent, the conservative Moon Yong-in has about a 52.6% support compared to the liberal Lee Soo-ho at 39.4%. So we'll leave it at that. Now, Carl, continuing on with our presidential election coverage, there's another very interesting factor in this year's election. Foreign media outlets have said, actually they've called ghosts of past presidents loom over Korea's election. Now, how do you think that played out in this election?
Well, I know that each camp has tried to tie the other candidate to its, quote-unquote presidential ghost. So they've tried to tie Moon Jae-in to Roh Moo-hyun and his policies, which many people see as being failed if you're one of the conservatives. And the DUP has really tried to tie Park Geun-hye to her father's rule, Park Chung-hee. The overall result of that, there's been a lot of fighting back and forth, but I really think that the public, while there is some concern about that, they've been very focused on the issues. They may not have been satisfied by their preferred candidate's platform, but I think they're really looking ahead. And I think for the media, the foreign media, it certainly makes a good headline. I know that Time magazine recently came out with Park Geun-hye on the cover and the title of The Dictator's Daughter.
So the strongman's daughter.
Yeah, originally, and then I believe Sae-Noori reacted to it and it got changed. So it certainly makes a good headline, and it certainly sells newspapers, as they would say, but I don't think it's played a major part in this election.
Well, it is a popularity contest if it all boils down to something simple. Basically, I think Park Geun-hye had a nice little title advantage in terms of having the Park Chung-hee advantage, or that label on her. In your opinion, how much of an advantage or disadvantage did she have because of that? And as for Moon Jae-in, of course, him being linked to the predecessors, how does that play in terms of both the pros and cons for both candidates, in your opinion?
Well, it seems to me that it's been a bit more of an advantage for Park Geun-hye because she's been able to consolidate her base. So people who are in their 50s or 60s who might be more traditional, much more conservative, they might not have been willing to accept a different female candidate. But because of who she is, they were more than willing to jump on board and throw their support behind her. As far as Moon Jae-in being tied to Roh Moo-hyun, that's a little more problematic because it is more recent. And now with North Korea kind of entering the fray with a recent rocket launch, there's still a lot of controversy about how Roh Moo-hyun dealt with North Korea. And the most recent story is that he may have given up or disavowed the NLL in private meetings. Now those transcripts are with the prosecutor's office and they're not being revealed, but there is that issue floating out there.
Right, and I think, today's the exit poll results, it reminds me a lot of our April general elections, Carl. If you remember, we had this much of a window, and we really couldn't make that call back then either. And I think it's just being continued from April to now in reflecting the very dead heat race that it is.
Right, well, Korea's at a very important place right now. It's really a rising power in the public opinion polling that we do. We see a lot more confidence out of the Korean public. This idea that in 10 years they expect themselves, Korea as a country, to be more influential than Japan. And they expect China to be more influential than the US. So Korea's at this very important time where it's trying to figure out what the next 5, 10 to 20 years are going to look like. And this is a very important election. There's also the welfare issue coming up. How are they going to support the weakest members of society? And they see the chaebol, they're always growing. Samsung is doing incredibly well. Hyundai is doing fairly well. But why aren't the lowest members of society also benefiting? So there is this real idea that the economic system is unbalanced. The education system, the economic system flows into the education system to keep it unbalanced. And so this is an important election. They need to determine where the country is going. And that's why I think there's so much divisiveness and this is going to be so close.
All right, thank you, Carl. We'll come back to you for more of your insights. But for now, we've brought you the early exit polls. But of course, nothing is final until the last vote has been counted.
That's right, Kanyang. And with that to be decided in a matter of hours from now, we wanted to let the new president-elect know what the Korean public expects of them. Our Kim Yeon-ji went out to the streets of Seoul to find out.
Hopes and dreams and an opportunity for change. That's often what comes to mind when it comes to elections, and for ordinary people, an election can be regarded as a turning point. We went out to several places around the city to hear what Koreans had to say about what they want from their next president.
There are too many people and too few jobs. There are working mothers, but they have nowhere to leave their children while they are at work. I sincerely hope the president will keep their promises to address these issues during their term.
I hope the next president can promote harmony among Koreans. There was too much negative campaigning. I hope the two political sides can refrain from mudslinging from now on.
Keeping in mind that no Korean president has been unscathed by allegations of corruption or bribery, some voters said they are longing for transparency.
I hope the president will not lie to the people. I hope they carry out their pledges. I'm praying for a just president and not someone who's different behind closed doors or trying to cover up acts of corruption.
Don't be too greedy for power and be more attentive to people that are in need.
The citizens of Korea have shared their hopes and dreams for this election. Whether those hopes and dreams will come true now rests on the shoulders of whoever becomes the next president of Korea. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
If you're joining us right now, this is Arirang News special coverage of the 2012 presidential election. Now, let's take a look at what happens after the elections. What kind of changes do we expect in the country's political landscape, for instance? We have Carl Friedhoff in the studio to help us through. Carl, what kind of changes are we expecting in the political landscape after the vote count is complete and the final results are out?
Well, depending on the candidate, if Moon Jae-in ends up becoming the president, I think he's going to have a much tougher time than Park Geun-hye just because the National Assembly is controlled